Hey everyone, welcome back to another GRE video. Today we're going to be talking about an analyze an issue essay. So I do this kind of essay review with a lot of my students, so if you're interested in getting private tutoring with me, more information about that at the end of the video. The type of question that we have here today is a little bit different because it has both a claim and a reason. If you look on the ETS website, which actually has all of the possible essay prompts that you can possibly get on the test, you will see that there are a few that are like this. So they have a claim and they have a reason. Usually they only have a claim. But for this type of essay, you obviously want to address both in each of the different arguments that you make in your body paragraphs. And because of that, it can be a little bit different. For this question, it's also pretty complex because this is probably not a topic that you think about a lot or that you're talking about a lot. And for that reason, it's really important to understand exactly what it is that you're talking about, that you're trying to argue. So let's read it. The claim is, many problems of modern society cannot be solved by laws and the legal system. The reason, laws cannot change what is in people's hearts and minds. So the implication here is that people's hearts and minds are at the root of many problems of modern society. The question is to write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim and the reason on which that claim is based. So notice here that it's talking about the extent to which you agree or disagree. So you typically don't want to just say, I agree or I disagree, but that you mostly or somewhat or a little bit agree or disagree. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the actual essay. So the introduction starts like this. How strongly can the legal system solve the problems of modern society? The author states that laws often can't be used to solve these problems. I mostly agree with this statement because many modern problems are based on different ideologies, which laws cannot restrict. Further, some problems go beyond the borders of countries, but we still need the legal system that sets the frame how to behave. Upon reading this, I do want to preface it by saying that this student was not a native English speaker, so you can see a few grammatical errors such as this. So when we talk about solving a problem, we usually will say efficiently or something like that. So how efficiently can the legal system solve the problems of modern society? So aside from that, I will point out that usually you don't want to use rhetorical questions with a question mark at the end in your GRE essays. The reason is because usually questions are meant to be answered, and if you don't answer that question immediately, you are opening yourself up to a million other questions that need to be talked about. And what you want to do in your essay, the purpose of it is to give evidence, to make your argument, and to convince somebody that your point of view is correct. By asking rhetorical questions like this, you really are straying from that purpose and not focusing in on just making your argument and trying to convince somebody. So I would much rather this person just change up the wording a little bit to make it a statement instead of a question. Something like, it's difficult to know how efficiently the legal system can solve the problems of modern society. The other thing that I want to point out about this introduction is this last sentence here. We still need the legal system to set the frame on how to behave. So this is a really weird sentence because needing the legal system to set the frame on how to behave is really something totally different from what the prompt is talking about. So this is about solving problems of modern society with laws and the legal system because of people's hearts and minds. I'll get into that a little bit later, but what the author is trying to do here is trying to give a concession. And I will never, never, never recommend that you try to do this in the introduction paragraph. The reason is you're just trying to lay out your argument and argue for what you believe in the first paragraph. You are setting the stage for you to make an argument, and that is not helped by saying that the other side is correct or the other side has a point in this regard. It's much better if you just go ahead and delete that. Let's start on the first paragraph. First, especially personal attitudes and mindset, which can't be restricted by law, are the source of many problems of modern society. Take racism, for instance. To support racist ideas is not prohibited by law. Every person has the freedom to think what they want. Still, they are restricted by law in executing their attitude, but people may organize themselves and speak in favor of their opinion. This phenomenon can be seen with many different ideologies, like religion or political orientation. Freedom of speech is crucial in a democracy, but it leads to problems among the citizens where opposed opinions meet each other. So you might be thinking that this sounds a little bit awkward, and I would completely agree with you. Now, setting aside the fact that there are a few grammatical errors and a few syntax errors, for example, I would say personal mindset, not especially, and then here in executing their attitude, I would say something like forcing their ways of life on others, something like that. Other than that, it's unclear what this paragraph exactly is trying to argue. I think it is missing a little bit of focus, because what he's saying here is that racism is a problem, but it's a little bit unclear about the difference between organizing and speaking about racism and forcing their way of life on others. You can assume this a little bit, but when you're writing, you want to make this distinction clear, because that is the root of the whole paragraph. If you don't explain the difference between organizing and speaking about your opinions versus forcing your way of life on others, then the role of the law is really unclear in this case. And talking about freedom of speech and problems among citizens, it really doesn't seem connected. And the other thing about that particular argument is that it sounds like what this person is arguing is that we should instead all think the same thing and we should all totally agree. In some cases, that is probably ideal, when it comes to believing scientific evidence, for example. But if you're talking about opinions about a TV show, for instance, not having a difference in opinion is not a problem, and it's actually not preferred. So this paragraph, the logic is a little bit off, and this can definitely happen if you come across a prompt that you've never really thought about before, or you're really not clear about. And what I did with this particular paragraph is I want to clarify the difference between what is acceptable and what is kind of not acceptable or considered a problem. So here, when you're talking about forcing their way of life on others and organizing themselves and speaking about racism, for example, you really want to have the distinction. So, for example, even if racist people meet and talk about their ideas, they are breaking the law if they try to act on them. So this is, I would probably say, legally meet. They're breaking the law if they try to act on them. And this basically clarifies the difference between making others do what they want and just having that opinion in the first place. The other thing that I would really think about in this case is how to organize this paragraph. And what I have here is to think a little bit about what it is that you're trying to explain. And I have it written out here. So the argument here is that people are racist because of their personal attitudes and opinions. So this is consistent with what the claim was talking about. Now, what you want to explain further is that even though laws restrict them from doing what they want, so let's say doing racist things, committing hate crimes, passing racist laws, etc., they still organize and speak about racism. So there's still that intent there, and that idea and that sort of internalization is still a problem. And what you want to then say is why this is a problem. So not only that racism and racist idea still exists, but that it's a problem and that laws can't really solve the problem, or that laws really challenge the problem. It's more about laws not being able to change people's ideas more than it is about freedom of speech or something like that. So I know that's a lot. Think about that a little bit. Moving on. Second, the legal system can't solve problems that go beyond borders. Of course, we have some international agreements like human rights, but there are also global problems that the legal system can't solve. Climate change, for example, is a threat to the whole of humanity. Nations can determine the law that prevents greenhouse gas emissions within a country, but it can't be extended on a global scale because no agreement has been found. So again, modern problems can't be solved with the legal system. And I think the idea behind this paragraph is really pretty solid. Climate change is a huge modern problem, and the laws do struggle a lot to solve it. But what I want to point out here is that, yes, we don't have an agreement, an international agreement about climate change for a real solid plan, but the closest thing that we have is the Paris Climate Agreement. But what this doesn't address is the reason why, and that is the whole purpose of this essay and the question that you have at the very top, right? Why can problems not be solved by laws in the legal system? It's not just that laws are focused on one country, but it's also that people's hearts and minds and their ideologies within all of those countries are really, really different. And you want to address both the claim and the reason here. So if you want to talk about climate change, I think it's much better to elaborate on why countries can't come to a consensus or why they have so much trouble. An example would be that they have different opinions on the historical role of countries in climate change. The US, for example, since industrialization, has been putting out massive amounts of greenhouse gases, and now developing countries want to be able to modernize their economy in the same way, but they're being asked to scale down their production or invest a lot in really expensive technologies that hold back their development, even though the United States and other industrialized countries have been doing the same thing for decades. That's one idea. So you really want to be able to explain and elaborate on your point to make sure that you not only address both the claim and the reason for this type of prompt, but also that you have sound logic when it comes to this. And as it stands right now, the question of why an international agreement hasn't come up yet is not answered. All right, and then the last body paragraph here, which is the concession. On the other side, the legal system sets a framework for a country's population for what is allowed and what not. If we imagine a nation without a legal system, this country will have much more problems than adjudicative. There will be no laws, and people will not see any consequences for their actions. In this way, robbery or violence would not be punished. Therefore, although the legal system can't prevent all the modern society problems, we would be much worse off if there were no one. Aside from the grammar and the syntax and the vocabulary here, it seems like the author is trying to make the point that the legal system is very important to keep everything under control. Yes, I would say that's probably true, but the problem is that this totally misses the mark. The prompt here is about the legal system solving modern problems, and no modern problem has been identified here at all. On top of that, we don't have any information about hearts and minds or viewpoints or anything like that that could talk about personal perspectives. And the whole thing is incredibly off topic, which is really unfortunate because the point that's being made is not a terrible one. So what I would say in this case is something like this, which is that laws can, in some cases, speed up changing people's minds. So in this case, what you're doing is you're saying, yes, laws do have some role in solving modern problems. For example, if we're talking about racism, like we were talking about above, if laws change, people can think that these ideas are more common or more right than what they used to think. So having less racism, or allowing same-sex marriage, legalizing marijuana, or other topics like this. But you want to make sure that with any concession that you are furthering your own argument. So you want to make sure that what your whole essay is saying is reiterated in that paragraph. So you can concede, but you want to make sure to say, it is not the laws that change the hearts and minds, but it could help people change more quickly. Something along those lines, which then leads to solving of modern problems. So I didn't write out the whole paragraph, but the idea is here, and if you write a paragraph like this, it is a much stronger concession. We have lastly here the conclusion. In conclusion, the legal system can't solve all the problems of modern society. Many of today's problems are because of different ideologies which can't be restricted by law. Further, there are problems in modern society that can be seen in different nations and concerning humanity, as the legal system will not be able to stop them. Still, we need the legal system, which sets the boundaries of behaving within a community. Again, it's pretty hard to do a conclusion incorrectly. It's really great that he has stated the main point he's trying to make, summarized body paragraph 1, summarized body paragraph 2, and here summarizing the concession is not super important, and in this case I would completely delete this because that point about needing the legal system is totally off topic. So that was the whole essay, and before I end, I want to cover a few key takeaways that you can learn from my essay review. And the first one is that when you are looking at a prompt, especially a complex one and one that you're not super familiar with, you need to clarify the question. Ask yourself, what question are you trying to answer, and what does it say in the prompt? Make sure that you read the prompt 2 or 3 times just to make sure that you're really comfortable with what it's saying and what it's asking you so that you don't get sidetracked. The next point I want to say is don't use rhetorical questions. You can, and sometimes it's effective, but most of the time you're really not trying to raise more questions. You're trying to tell people what to think and what you think and why it's correct. If you want to use rhetorical questions, you really need to be thinking about them in terms of having them already answered by the time that you actually ask them. Most of the time in the GRE types of essays, they do not have a place, so I would recommend against them. The last thing is specific for this type of prompt where you have both a claim and a reason. Now, you don't have to address both 50-50, but you do want to make sure that somewhere in each of your paragraphs that you at least mention each of them. And this makes sure that you're talking about both of them, and there can be nuance if you agree with one or disagree with the other, but you do have to address both of them, and you want to make sure that you do that. Now, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, I do offer private GRE tutoring, and for essay writing, it does look something like what I went through in this video, but how it works overall is you get to choose what it is that you want to work on. So whether that is writing, verbal, and or quantitative, you can choose one, you can choose 3, or you can just choose 2. And in a free consultation, which you can sign up for down below, we can create a study plan for you. I'll come up with a few sample session agendas, and we can talk that over. And when we study together, I can show you a few sample questions, I can point you to sample resources, I can do a content review with you and talk about different strategies and examples for different types of questions. And of course, logistically, I offer a lot of flexible payment and scheduling options, so you never have to worry about the logistics. I've also included a sample review from one of my former students, and I would be more than happy to work with you. Just make sure to sign up for a free consultation down below. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Good luck on the GRE. Bye!